everyone. This is Pop Goes the Stack, the podcast where emerging tech is put under the microscope and sometimes the flamethrower. I'm Lori MacVittie. Put your safety goggles on for this episode because Joel and I are here today to talk about the perimeter that isn't where we left it, or maybe it didn't exist, or it does, or it doesn't. We're not sure. We got Chuck Herrin here, and he's going to help us talk about the impact of agents on the move. APIs are also on fire. Your infrastructure is about as ready for this as a fax machine is ready for a DDoS. This week, we're talking about guardrails, actual guardrails for the age of agentic AI, which isn't here, but it is here, but it could be here very shortly. We're not sure. Okay, because your dashboards are off doing something with metrics, but vendors actually got serious and they've started dropping all sorts of different product launches and they show a clear pivot toward AI security. AI washing, Joel, right?
In some cases, I'm sure.
Yeah.
There's some interesting stuff happening in vendor space today.
There is. That's true. Let's not completely dismiss it, because it is. We have to move, and sometimes it's just moving in small steps, but it has to move. I think that's the premise. Security has to move because the perimeter already did.
Yeah, I don't know about that, Lori. Every time, if I had a nickel for every time someone in my 30 years of security experience told me that the perimeter was shifting, they tell me it shifts almost as much as paradigms do, and I don't believe either one of them shift all that much. In fact, I frankly don't even think the concept of a perimeter really even existed. It's an arbitrary thing that's specific to the scenario. These days, there virtually is no perimeter. The inside and the outside look almost exactly the same. With agents, it becomes the inside, the outside, and the context. And I think that's something we're going to have to come into contact with. What do you think, Chuck?
I totally agree. I mean, the perimeter, to your point, why I think you'd have so many nickels is the perimeter's been shifting for 20 years. You know, we started in the first time I really started using public cloud was in the late 2000s. And we did it because we needed to do it for stress testing for financial services. You just simply couldn't burst 10,000 cores into existence in your data center. So we had to learn how to operate in a whole new model, and we've never gone back. Like we've never really gone away from that. And now, most enterprises that I speak to in my my travels and so forth, they don't know how many interfaces they expose to the outside in terms of API endpoints. In most cases, plus or minus 5,000. And what perimeter is there? I think that we've really been setting the stage for. We're coming out of this really, I think, hype cycle into a lot of folks don't see how good AI is getting at a lot of things because they're still constrained to the chat interface. And having a casual conversation next to a single serving friend at a bus stop doesn't really indicate how smart they actually are. You can't get to the core of just how smart today's frontier models really are via chat interface. And so I think a lot of the real intelligence that forward-looking enterprises are actually getting use of aren't immediately intuitive to those who are thinking of LLMs in the context of like ChatGPT. But where we are from a defender perspective reminds me, if you guys remember that early scene from, I think it was Attack of the Clones, where young Obi-Wan Kenobi is on Kimono touring the factory where the clones are being grown, and they're not quite ready for battle yet, but they're coming. And this is what I'm thinking when I think of the economic incentives for attackers and where we are as defenders. When you look at the economic incentives for attackers, everybody wants AI agents doing their bidding and making them money. Criminals are no exceptions. They just aren't quite ready yet. So what do we need to be getting ready for? If we think that we still have a perimeter, I think, Lori, we're sorely mistaken. But what do defenders need to be thinking about in terms of what used to be the perimeter? What does my actual attack surface look like? And what do I need to be worried about? I think that's the conversation that a lot of defenders need to be having. But they still don't know. They don't know today, much less know what it's going to look like in a year from now.
Yeah, and I think that one of the scary things that people haven't considered yet, APIs always enter the conversation because that's how we communicate and integrate with inference, which is actually how we get at our models. That makes sense. API security has to grow and change and adapt as well. And I think it is. That's part of the, vendors dropping new capabilities, is a lot of it is around APIs, but they're not necessarily looking at what's in the actual payload, right? What's being exchanged. I mean, we talk about prompt injection, but we don't really look at it and say what's going on. And what's going on is it's sending system level messages inside a user prompt. Now, that is completely different from anything that we've seen in the past. And how do we secure against that becomes the big question. There is no perimeter. There's not even a differentiation between control plane and data plane in that case. It's just all, the surface area is, yes, everything.
Yeah, there's an architect here at F5, and he and I oftentimes discuss things in the context of the old OSI layer model, where, down towards layer 7, you have the presentation, then the application layer, and that there's really the emergence of a layer 8, a contextual layer. One where a lot of things present themselves as a web transaction. API transactions present themselves as a web transaction. When you're looking to see whether something should be allowed or rejected, when you're looking to see whether an attacker is misusing something, you almost have to go one layer deeper and understand how the context of what's being performed, understand the context of the request that's being performed, and analyze that for security problems. And so we always joke that there's an emerging layer 8. Nobody's seen it yet.
It's 8,
Totally.
9. Layer 8 has emerged so many times. APIs, business processes, it's humans. No, there's like 8, 9, and 10 layers, right, at this point.
Yeah. Well, and when you look at what the attackers are doing, exploiting that layer 8 or these new attack surfaces, whether we call them perimeter or not, but things that the defenders aren't necessarily aware of. Like, go ask the average CISO. I do a lot of the CXO roundtable events and things like that. Show of hands. How many CISOs have accepted that it's going to be their responsibility to secure inference? They're not thinking of that yet. QA testers aren't thinking of that yet. But and when we look at attack patterns against even the bigger frontier models now, new attack patterns old attack patterns like best of n jailbreaking are still highly effective, and now new attack patterns like echo chamber jailbreaking, which is much more like gaslighting of a model. If you think of a model as a stochastic approximation of a human, they're actually pretty easy to social engineer. And the defenders, CISOs aren't really thinking of how are they part of the development, the growing process of these models. How are they securing inference, and whose problem is it? And where I think we're going to land as defenders here in the next year or so is if chief and security is in your title, security stuff is your problem. How do you get your arms around that? And where do you even know these models are coming from? It's a really, really difficult challenge. And the attackers, however, are going to continue to get faster and smarter and better. Right. They already are. So you mentioned context earlier. Look at how the attackers today are amplifying what old attack patterns, social engineering, phishing emails, things like that. They're doing things now automatically generating context based on LinkedIn relationships and things that they can infer and figure out based on open source information, and automatically put that in phishing emails that are targeting these broad populations. They're exploiting context more effectively than defenders have started using context on the defense. We're going to have to change that.
Yeah. Let's talk for a moment about the impact of agentic AI. And I want to look at it from two different perspectives. First of all, agentic AI used to make money, to generate money for businesses. Everybody wants to make money out of automating things, creating automated sequences. Attackers also have the equal access that all of us do to agentic AI and are using it to effect there. What do people need to take into account when they're deploying agentic AI, and what do SOCs need to take into account if they are the target of malicious agentic AI?
Lori, do you want to start, or you want me to?
Wow. Well, what should they be aware of? Well, one, let's start with that exists. That's a thing. And you do need to be aware that you may not have been a target in the past. There's sometimes a perception that, well, they're not going to attack me, right? They'll attack someone else. The dragon and the example, right? You don't have to be faster than the dragon. You just have to be faster than the next guy. That was actually a security concept spread around the community many years ago. And so they sometimes think, well, we won't be attacked. Well, AI not only helps them do it faster and better, but it also means that they can have better coverage. So you may not have been a target before, but I think now you might be, because it costs them almost nothing to go out and just blast everything. Right. So it's changing the reach, I would say, of attackers as well. So you have to be aware that you are probably going to be under attack at some point.
Yeah. I totally agree. And Joel, my thought on that is that the primary metric that I'm looking at this from a CISO perspective is the return on attacker investment. So, we talk a lot about, if you show me the incentive, I'll show you the outcome. The reason that attackers are leveraging generative AI to the degree that they are is because that's where the money is. As they get better at doing things like enumeration and attack surface mapping and chaining together series of API calls that currently take human penetration testers or human bot herders to do, that's what they're going to do, right? That's going to, and I think what we're really going to see is for organizations that don't have their fundamentals in order. My biggest concern is that people simply don't know what their attack surface is. You stand no chance in an asymmetric battle when what I'm calling red agents get good enough to approximate human penetration testers.
Yeah.
Everybody falls to a human penetration tester. When I used to be a penetration tester, we had a 96% success, success target, and this was almost 20 years ago. And generally speaking, where we didn't hit success, it was some constraint of the exercise that stopped us. And that was a limitation of human labor, the amount of intelligence we could put to it. We had reports to write. We had other clients in the queue. All that stuff goes away, and the attackers then are going to seek the return on attacker investment that they're going to be able to maximize, and they're also not going to pay for their own GPU. They're not going to pay for their own compute. They're going to steal it. They're going to do what they do today. They're going to, we start embedding LLMs or SLMs with IoT devices, that free trials, gift card fraud, like this whole ecosystem is going to shift to automating as much of this as possible. And as long as there's a positive return on investment, it's a virtuous spiral from the attacker's perspective. I think defenders, now is the time really to master the fundamentals and get your house in order, get your attack surface under control, and get your technology debt, get some plans to really get these basics in order, because you're not going to be able to defend against automated human level penetration testers, which is what I think sort of the phase 2 of AI, of red agents, right? Attacking agents is really going to go. And that's probably going to be, my guess, in the next 12 to 24 months.
Yeah. The thing that I spend a lot of my time thinking about in the area of context, by the way, which we've talked about context already, but context is really the thing that you're trying to build toward to ensure trust. One of the things that Agentic AI is bringing to fore is that an agent will do work on behalf of someone. It will do something with their identity to perform an action on their behalf. And so really understanding Agentic AI means that you have to not only connect the agent and its behavior, but you have to connect that behavior back to the identity that it's acting on behalf of. Would this be something that someone would ask for? It's kind of the next step from trying to figure out if someone is a bot or not. Now you have to figure out it is a bot, but is it a bot that's actually acting behaviorally in a way that this particular user would? And that's going to be tricky business. A lot of people are going to grant rights to agents to act on their behalf without understanding exactly what they are doing. They're going to grant rights to do a sequence of activities that is going to be planned out by the AI agent itself. They're not going to be able to specifically and explicitly allow each and every individual action. And I think that that's a whole new world, a new territory. Um, and from the attacker side, I can also see that if you're trying to figure out whether an attacker has stolen a set of identities and is using an agentic AI to automate an attack sequence, you're going to have to figure that out, because the identity is going to look, yeah, this is an authenticated and authorized action, but is it an action that user would actually perform?
Right.
That's where this technology is going to have to go.
Well, and that is almost a good case that they actually do, right, tie it to a user identity, because traditionally integration and systems inside operate using system level or generic accounts, JDBC account, right? That connects to your database. It was
Sure.
never tied to a user. The systems actually had to go, okay, this user made this SQL call, and that's not okay, and connect the dots that way. So if they're actually giving them some sort of identity, I think that's actually a step forward, because that will give them at least a leg up to understand, well, this person does not have rights to be looking at this data or this system or connecting. So that may help a little bit, actually. I think that may actually be a good impact on security.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that what we're going to see, sort of kind of in that space too, is we need to better understand the context and the way that our applications work, because that's going to be much more important than like stateless firewalls or rate limiters are really going to be blind to say AI agents going out semi-autonomously or autonomously, finding some novel 15-step sequence of legitimate API calls to create an account, apply 5 different promotions to it, place an order, and then have a refund issued to a different account. Sort of all in sequence. Right? That kind of complex attack pattern currently takes humans to figure out. We're going to need to increase the visibility and understanding of how our applications work at layer 7 to be able to effectively defend against that. That's where, from an API security space, we've been seeing these types of attacks for a long time, but they've been restricted to human exploitation. That's not going to be the case in a year or two.
Yeah. Now, shifting gears here, let's talk about what's going on in the security industry to kind of directly attack this issue with agentic AI. There's been plenty of work that's gone on either in startups, or I know that some of the big names, people like Palo Alto, Akamai, et cetera, they've been hard at work figuring out what to do about this problem set. Anything strike you as particularly interesting out there, Chuck?
I'm a little disappointed, actually, coming back from Black Hat a few weeks ago at the just sheer amount of AI washing and hype that we're still in. And it seems like it's kind of like the old saying, never ask a surgeon if you need surgery, because the answer is always yes. It seems like everybody that we talk to in one way or another is positioning themselves for why what I already sell is the solution for tomorrow's problems. And unfortunately, I think there's lots more than a grain of truth to that. If you think of the defense in depth strategy that we generally recommend, things like signals intelligence, bot defense, rate limiting, job validation, a lot of these things really do still matter. And I think that the hype cycle is blurring away from what are the actual things that we need to defend against, and how are we going to actually use AI for defense in real practical technical terms. You kind of dig for that, right? But I do see some real movement, especially in financial services and to a lesser degree in telecoms, in effectively using generative AI for security operations, a lot of automation of workflows, defenders getting better, defenders getting smarter, and even red teams being more effective at mapping out their own attack surfaces and doing more advanced enumeration. So you kind of have to sift through a lot of the BS still in the hype cycle. But I think there's legitimate offerings here. What I haven't seen is anybody really pull it all together end to end, because I think the space is just evolving too quickly. It's one thing to play with something in a lab. It's another to productize it and test it and then get it ready to run at scale and get it out into the marketplace. And that's kind of a different animal.
Yeah, I tend to agree. As I look around, I am excited and intrigued by some of the advancements that are being made in AI observability. I think some of those systems are getting quite good at being able to look at and manage and provide visibility into how your AI systems are functioning. In some cases, some of them have expanded even into the area of semantic threat detection and protection at runtime, which I think is quite good. But yeah, like you, I'm a little disappointed that a lot of old technologies are being reapplied anew. Although you still have to do the basics. These technologies are at their heart web technologies built on an API back, and you need to protect them in ways that you would normally protect those applications. But there's that semantic, there's that contextual layer that I think is something that can only be seen through true observability. I also look around and see a steady improvement in AI assistance specifically for SOC. I looked at a particular startup just a few weeks ago that was offering the ability to automatically produce an after action report while the investigation was still going on. So you can basically point your executives at a post mortem that's being generated of an incident in flight, which I think is kind of cool. It definitely takes a lot of pressure off of the SOC analyst who knows that they have to solve the problem, but at the same time they have to keep everybody informed. And there's a tension between getting that done and actually solving the problem. So those tools are definitely going to make SOCs more effective.
Yeah, for sure. I remember there's nothing more frustrating than running down an incident and also fielding update requests, every 15 minutes from the executives.
Right.
So anything we can do to sort of lower that cognitive burden and resource burden on the behalf of defenders is definitely going to help, especially when you're hot in the middle of a response. You don't know what the heck's going on.
That sounds like at least two of our takeaways at this point. One being the tools that you have are still valuable. You can't throw them all away. There are still going to be DDoS attacks and bots. AI is additive. It's not taking away all of the attacks you already have to defend against. So those tools still valid. And I see the second one I heard is it's got to change. It's got to change. There has to be new techniques, new approaches, new tools, because this is just advancing very, very fast. And that's two. So, one of you guys want to come up with a third takeaway for listeners?
For me, it's choose who you decide to partner with thoughtfully. So build a partnership based on expertise and the value that they can bring to your technology ecosystem. So I always stop short of recommending like any one partner for security, because I think that's too much supply chain, too much vendor risk. But when I think of managing the complexity of my attack surface as a defender, as a CISO today, along with a complex supply chain where everybody's trying to AI all the things, they don't have their own cryptographic bill of materials, they're not ready for PQC yet. I need to simplify my entire ecosystem. I need to understand, I need to map my true battlefield, which is really my interfaces. They're attacking you via your interfaces. So whatever your interfaces are, whether they're APIs, application programming interfaces, web, etc., you got to know that. Control the choke points. So while the perimeter's dead, we still do have choke points where we can do governance, observability, automation, defense, and all of that stuff. And then choose your partners wisely. I think those are the three things I would throw out there. Because you really don't have time to sift through a supply chain of 100 different vendors with their own AI BS and hype cycle to deal with. Pick a few good ones and get 90% out of 10 relationships instead of 10% out of 90 relationships. That would be my advice to defenders.
Joel?
Well, you guys took most of my takeaways, but I would leave you with one specific one. And I think as a security professional, I think it's time for us to get very thoughtful about the concept of contextual security. I think we need to start thinking a little bit more about how we actually build trust levels. We've run down the rabbit hole of zero trust, and I think zero trust is a misnomer. If you have zero trust, you shouldn't be allowing any access. It's actually about a managed process of constructing contextual security based on attributes that you know are true about something that you're trying to ensure the trust for. And I think that we've gotten okay at it in certain scenarios with certain zero trust tools. But I think the holistic one, in the face of agentic AI, is going to have to be completely rewritten. And I think as security professionals, we need to think long and hard about what contextual security really means.
I like that. I like that. Yes, contextual security. Security is going to change. I think that's ultimately you're in for some fun, some excitement, some learning, some new things, and it's going to be a rough ride. So buckle up, but you'll all get there. You'll all get there because that's
the perimeter shifts and the paradigm changes.
Oh, I tried to rap before he said it. I tried.
I need that nickel. Come on.
I tried.
We'll have new AI quantum blockchain synergies.
Oh,
there we go.
All right, that is definitely a wrap for Pop Goes to Stack this week. Smash subscribe before we set something else ablaze. Take your safety goggles off. Until next episode.